Understandest thou what thou readest in the King James Bible? Today's false friend is counsel in Acts 27:42. What do you think the word meant in 1611 in a context like that one? This is the context. The prison ship Paul is in as he heads to Rome has run aground and something has to be done before the prisoners all escape. The soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. What does counsel mean in this verse? What would you have assumed the word meant if I hadn't just told you it was a false friend? Please pause the video and comment. Your comments really, really help me. I learn so much from what you comment. Okay, now let's talk about counsel. Many times in the King James Version, counsel is not a false friend. It's used just the way we use it today. This is the very first instance, for example, Exodus 18:19. Hearken now unto my voice, I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. The context makes it clear that the counsel is verbal advice given from one person to another. And here I go, going out of my usual order, but that's just what contemporary dictionaries say is the sense of counsel. The New Oxford American Dictionary on my Mac gives advice, especially that given formally. The American Heritage Dictionary gives advice or guidance, especially as solicited from a knowledgeable person. And that totally works in Acts 27:42. The advice or guidance given by the soldiers, the professionals, was we should just kill these prisoners. That was their professional opinion. But every other major modern English Bible translation has plan instead of counsel. And that's a big difference, right? It's one thing for the soldiers to advise the centurion in charge with their professional opinion and then wait for his ruling. It's another thing for them to be actively planning to kill all the prisoners, and the centurion has to stop them. If I'm a prisoner on that ship, I want them to be giving advice. I don't want men with swords forming a definite plan. So why does the King James Version have counsel where the modern translations all have plan? To be clear, there's no textual difference here. All English translations are translating the same Greek word, and all of them, except for the King James, all the modern ones have plan here. So let's go to step 2 and look up that Greek word. BDAG says it means that which one thinks about as possibility for action, a plan, a purpose, or intention. Often my false friends are not 180 degrees off from what modern readers are already seeing in a word in a given context. And that's true here. It's not a massive difference. When people give counsel, they're often expressing a plan, and plans often derive from counsel. But I want to understand whatever the King James Version translators intended. They were smart guys. And if they're saying advice instead of plan, they're going against the meaning of the Greek word as reported by BDAG. So did the King James translators make a mistake? BDAG says this word means plan, and all the modern translations go with plan. Why did the King James translators choose counsel? If you've watched any of my other videos in this long False Friends series, a series that is soon coming to an end, by the way, I think 50 will be a good number to stop at, then you'll know that my answer is no. The King James translators did not make a mistake. Here's where things get complex today, because I'm going to have to admit that I was surprised by what the dictionaries told me. 2 of them went against my gut as a writer, editor, and general word nerd. As sometimes occurs, though 2 of my 4 dictionaries stuck with advice, 2 others I commonly check did mention a sense of counsel that works really well in Acts 27:42 and happens to match the Greek perfectly. And they didn't mark this sense as archaic or obsolete. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary gives a policy or plan of action or behavior as one sense of counsel. It does not mark this sense as archaic, as I said, though it does have another sense, and I find this somewhat confusing, that it does mark as archaic, namely purpose. Take that for what it's worth. And the mighty OED also says that counsel can be used to mean that in which deliberation results, resolution, purpose, intention, plan, design, scheme. It too has a sense of counsel that is now obsolete and does fit some King James passages. A private or secret purpose, design, or opinion, and it marks this as obsolete. This may perhaps be the sense the King James translators intended in Acts 4, where Peter speaks to God of whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before it to be done. We're going to talk about that verse more in a minute. But that could also have been this sense 4, and we're talking about Acts 27:42 today. That's the passage I brought up. Is the soldier's counsel was to kill the prisoners a false friend? I'm going to have to pull out the little used step 5 in my false friends process. That step is to check various linguistic corpuses to actually see if the dictionaries are right. This is something I only do when my gut tells me some of them are wrong. Will anyone out there today, let alone any plowboys, understand the soldier's counsel was to kill the prisoners to mean that their plan or purpose was to kill them instead of their advice? A corpus will help us know if people today still use counsel to mean resolution, purpose, intention, plan, design, or scheme. So I did the hard work of looking at hundreds and hundreds of uses of counsel from the corpus of contemporary American English, and this is what I found. Plenty of people used the word counsel in the sense of advice. The context frequently makes this abundantly clear. Here's just one example of hundreds. Nobody listens to the counsel of a poor man, not even when they are giving advice about themselves. A contextual redundancy helps you there to see that counsel absolutely has to mean advice. But today, the most frequent sense of counsel, by far, is the sense of legal counsel. In other words, lawyers. Here is just one of countless examples. Mark R., Senior Counsel of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. Here's another. The independent counsel had offered a deal to Wilson, but he had refused. Again, that's counsel meaning lawyer. This is a form of metonymy because the lawyer is being called by the name of the thing he or she provides, that is, formal professional advice. The corpus I checked included lots of uses of counsel by Christians. Actually, I saw a reference to J. Adams' counseling book, Competent to Counsel. I even saw 2 quotations from the King James Version and one from Puritan John Owen that were indeed using the plan sense. But outside of those 3 quotations from documents from the 1600s, I could find no instance of anyone using the word counsel to mean plan, the way Acts 27:42 does. I checked hundreds and hundreds of uses of the word until I finally gave up. I think Merriam-Webster and the OED should label this sense as archaic, or maybe obsolete, or maybe literary. I'd have to look at even more usage before I could say for sure. Every time I do this work, I am amazed that we even have an Oxford English Dictionary. The work that went into this resource was mind-bogglingly incredible, if you know the story. It took decades to complete, and then they just kept going, revising as the language changed. They're still going now, and I'm grateful for their work. So it is possible, if someone thinks to look up counsel while reading Acts 27 and happens to look it up in the right dictionary and realizes that this alternate sense works a little better in context than the advice sense, it's possible that a modern King James reader will get this. I will say, too, that the context says that the centurion kept the soldiers from their purpose. A good reader then might notice that the advice sense is mildly odd. But my foray into the linguistic corpus confirms my gut feeling that most readers today will be tripped up by this false friend, at least in this one passage, Acts 27:42. And D.A. Waite's defined King James Bible thinks the same as I do, because it says that counsel here is archaic, and that it meant intention, resolution, or purpose back in 1611. It always feels a little funny when I agree with D.A. Waite, but I'll take it. Now, I've listened to my faithful critics on this channel. I think my critics will say, well, the plowboy should know because he's read his King James Bible enough to realize that the word counsel sometimes meant something slightly different in 1611. But I've looked. It seems to me that the vast majority of times that counsel appears in the King James Version, it means just what we mean. It means advice, like give here your advice and counsel in Judges 27. There are a few places, especially in the New Testament, where that sense doesn't work as well, and maybe good readers will pick up on this, but maybe not. And some of these uses of counsel are a lot more significant than Acts 27:42. 2 of them are highly theologically important, I'd say, and I'll talk about those in a bit, like I promised. Maybe good readers will notice that in the very precious statement of Peter at Pentecost, Acts 2:23, that Jesus was delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God into the hands of wicked men, Peter was saying that this was God's plan, not his advice. Maybe good readers will notice this, but maybe not. Maybe good readers will notice that when the Pharisees and lawyers rejected the counsel of God against themselves by refusing John the Baptist's baptism, they weren't rejecting God's advice, they were rejecting his plan. Maybe not. Maybe they'll notice that when Paul says that the Lord will make manifest the counsels of the hearts, 1 Corinthians 4:5, that verbal advice from the hearts doesn't make good sense. But maybe not. So there's an easy way to solve this problem we have with counsels in Acts 27:42 and other passages. Revise the King James Version. Or just use the New King James, which is a revision of the King James and uses the same Hebrew and Greek text as the King James. The New King James in Acts 27:42 uses the word plan. No one is going to misunderstand this. I'm not saying we should all throw the King James away, but as often I'm saying that it's wrong to insist on the exclusive use of the King James, and especially wrong to make KJV onlyism a doctrine. I am jealous for the plowboy. I want him to understand what he reads in his Bible. I don't want him to have to buy the right Bible edition with all the right glosses in the margins. I want him to just be able to read the Bible without the need for that sort of thing. There are plenty of hard things in the Bible without adding the additional hardships of archaic and obsolete words and senses, without imposing on the plowboy the burden of looking up dead words and noticing false friends. I want the plowboy to understand that when Peter says in Acts 2 that Jesus was delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, that this isn't Peter saying that God gave this advice and knew in advance that it was going to happen. No, Peter is saying that this was God's plan, his choice. God sent his son on purpose. This is important theologically because in the next phrase, Peter says, "Ye have taken Jesus, and by wicked hands have crucified and slain him." In other words, Peter is, like many other verses in the Bible, like Joseph before his brothers in Genesis 50, saying that when God plans something, people are still responsible for the sin they commit while carrying out that divine plan. It's so important that nobody understands this to mean advice. I want the plowboy to understand when Peter prays to the Lord in Acts 4, "Against thy holy child Jesus, whom thou hast anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together, for to do whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before to be done." This is profound theology from an unlearned fisherman who spent 3 years at the feet of the greatest teacher our planet has ever known. Listen to him. He sets this up as if he's going to come down like a ton of bricks on Herod and Pilate and the Jews and Gentiles who crucified Jesus, but he ends the sentence by affirming God's complete sovereignty over their sin. Behind and over the very wickedest act in history, deicide, killing the sinless Messiah who just came to serve and save us all, is the plan of God. We just can't let the plowboy miss that counsel here does not mean expert advice, it means plan. God determined that this is the way his son would die in order to bring life to the world. Listen to what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you'll miss the gospel if you read the King James Version. I'm not saying you'll miss out on the plan of God. I'm not saying your theology will be ruined. I'm saying that at numerous little points, and a few bigger ones, false friends are going to trip up a significant percentage, a percentage no one knows for sure, of King James readers, especially if they are being told not even to look at other translations. And this is totally unnecessary. All they have to do is pick up the New King James. I want Bible readers to understand what God says, and now hopefully thou understandest what thou readest in the King James Version a little better.